States District Judge for the Northern District of Alabama, signed by 17 senators as follows.
Mr. President, I ask consent the reading of the names be waived.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Couple of topics I'd like to talk about. First, the government shutdown. I don't know what my friends on the other side expect. We will talk about the Affordable Care Act at the right time, starting with the idea it's not affordable. And you created a law without any Republican votes. You had the subsidies expire. That was your choice. Most of us believe that the Obamacare program you created is very expensive, and we're not going to extend it. We would look at trying to make it better. The president has a brilliant idea about how better to use the money to help consumers. Senator Marshall just left. So we're not going to, whether you open the government up or not, I'm not going to change my vote. I'm not going to vote to authorize these subsidies as they are. I'm not going to vote to repeal the good work we did under the big, beautiful bill. So let's open up the government and talk. And if you don't want to do that, then a lot of people are going to have their lives turned upside down for no good reason, because I don't feel like we should be held hostage here to get a legislative outcome to open up the government. We tried that as Republicans. You got to build the wall or we won't open the government. It's probably not a good idea for us. Didn't work out well for us, and nothing else learned from what we did. So I'm hoping the government will open soon. Dangerous time to have the federal government not functioning in the security space. It's danger for air travel, but if you haven't noticed, the world's a pretty dangerous place. So I want to talk about two things, China and Russia. President Trump is traveling to South Korea, and I think he's going to meet the Chinese President Xi. I don't mind talking with people that I disagree with. I like the fact that President Trump has reached out to adversaries, try to find common ground to end conflicts that have been very destructive. So when it comes to President Trump and Russia, he's made a full court press to try to get Russia at the table to find a way to end the bloodbath in Ukraine, to make it an outcome that's acceptable to all parties. I don't think President Trump's out to humiliate Putin at all, but he does want to end the war in a way that we don't have a third invasion. So I appreciate what he's done, and it's been very aggressive effort to engage the parties. In the past, we kind of ignored Putin. I don't think that's the right solution. But we've come to a point now where every time President Trump talks about a proposal to end the bloodbath, Putin has a reason not to get there. The latest proposal by President Trump is to have a ceasefire in place. Stop the fighting, stop the killing at the line of contact, go back to your respective sides, and we'll sit down and find a way forward to get a comprehensive deal. That's the best proposal I've heard from anybody. Ukraine said yes, Europe said yes, Putin says no. Putin continues to attack Ukraine. They show no indication of wanting to stop this war until they meet their war aims. Well, let me tell Russia, your war aims are not going to be accepted by the United States and Ukraine. Putin said today that he would respond fiercely if we increase the lethality of the Ukrainian military. Well, you said that a lot. I want the war to end. I don't want anything Russia has. I just want the war to end in an honorable and just way. So if you expect Ukraine to give you territory that you don't occupy today, that would create a pathway to Kyiv in the future, make them very vulnerable to a third invasion, it's not going to happen. And I know Putin could care less about how many Russians die. They say 1 million casualties. I don't know. Who knows? I know this. His respect for life is pretty low. North Koreans, people from all over the Russian provinces have been thrown into a meat grinder, and he could really care less. He does care about his own lifestyle. Beyond that, I don't think he cares less. Could care less. His economy is selling cheap oil and gas to fuel his war machine. So he's selling gas and oil well below market prices, Putin, to get the money to continue the attack on Ukraine. So President Trump and myself and many of us here are suggesting to those who buy cheap Russian oil and gas, stop it so we can find a way to get Putin to the peace table. The largest 3 customers buying Russian oil and gas that do not help Ukraine are China, India, and Brazil. If those 3 customers told Putin it's time to wind this war down, then I think the war would be over pretty quickly, because without oil and gas money, he can't prosecute the war. I understand wanting to buy cheap Russian oil, but I don't understand a country that buys cheap Russian oil knowing that it's going to be used to kill innocent people and acquire land from others by force of arms. I've been told that our friends in India are very proud. You have a lot to be proud of. I've been told that our friends in India are trying to find a way to be less dependent on Russian oil. To our friends in India, well done. Before the invasion by Putin, India was buying 3% of their oil from Russia. After the invasion, it went up to almost 30%. Why? They were buying it below market prices from Russia, refining it in India and selling it at a profit. That's not something to be proud of. I'm hopeful that you're going to abandon that practice to get us to a place where we can end the war in Russia and stop the killing. So there's some progress there. As to China, if President Xi called Putin tomorrow and said, it's now time to wind this conflict down, you need to get to the peace table, I think Putin would not have much of a choice. China is the #1 customer of Russian oil. If they made a decision tomorrow to change that practice, then I think Putin's ability to prosecute the war would hit a wall. Now, President Trump is going to talk to Xi, hopefully, here soon. And there'll be a lot of issues on the table. As to China, it's a communist dictatorship. I'm no fan of the Chinese Communist Party. To say otherwise would be misleading. Having said that, there's times that we can do business with China for the betterment of all of us. This is one of those times. I'm hoping that when President Trump meets with President Xi, if that happens, that he will be able to persuade President Xi it's now time to end the bloodbath in Ukraine. I need your help to get Putin to the table. And to China, if you were able to do that, I think it would open up opportunities between you, the United States, China, the United States, and the Western world to have a better relationship. If China wants to be a meaningful member of the international community and wants to be treated better, then act better. If you want to be treated normally, act normal. So to China, you have the power to help end this war. I would urge you to work with President Trump to achieve that goal. It will make the world a better place, and I think it will inure to the benefit of China. Sanctions were put on the 2 largest oil companies in Russia yesterday by Secretary Bessent at the direction of President Trump. I think President Trump has come to believe that Putin doesn't want a ceasefire at the line of contact, and everybody but him does. And I hope President Trump's new policy will be, I'm not going to talk to Russia anymore until they agree to a ceasefire at the line of contact like Ukraine has. Once that agreement's reached, then we can sit down and try to end this war. I hope you'll tell President Xi that you have the chance to help me in this war, please do. I, along with the presiding officer of the Senate, many of us, 85 co-sponsors, we have legislation allowing President Trump, at his choice, to impose tariffs on countries that buy cheap Russian oil to prop up Putin's war machine that don't help Ukraine, and that would be China. So President Trump has used tariffs robustly, I think, to the benefit of our country. If he decides to go down the road of going after Putin's customers, he would have the blessing of the Congress, the House and the Senate. I can't think of an issue that's brought us together as a body in the Senate more than the desire to end this war in Ukraine and to use all the tools available to help President Trump get Putin's attention. The fact that Democratic colleagues, who are probably not a big fan of this president, are willing to empower the president to have tariff authority given to him by the Congress that would be bulletproof in court speaks well to them, and it speaks loudly to the idea that the Senate is united when it comes to standing up to Putin and those who prop him up to end this bloodbath. This bill has been around for a long time. People ask me all the time, what's going to happen? I think President Trump has made a decision that a ceasefire in place is the right way to start discussions about how to end the war, and I hope he will stick with that position. I will expect the Senate to move the legislation I just described, the Russian Sanctions Act, that allows secondary tariffs against countries that buy cheap Russian oil. I would expect us to move that fairly soon. The Senate also has passed legislation making Russia a state sponsor of terrorism under U.S. law. There are 4 countries that fall in that category. Russia would be the 5th, for kidnapping over 19,000 Ukrainian children in the occupied areas. This is a very big deal to many of us. We've gone to Ukraine, we've heard the stories that Russia has occupied about 20-something percent of Ukraine, and they've literally taken Ukrainian children from their families, sent them to Russia, in indoctrination camps to turn these Ukrainian children against their own country. It's despicable. And it's not 200. I do believe the number is closer to 20,000. We have a lot of evidence, and I'll have a hearing in the Foreign Operations Subcommittee about it. But the bill making Russia a state sponsor of terrorism for kidnapping the children went through the Foreign Relations Committee yesterday unanimously. It's ready to come to the floor. And I can't think of a better description of Putin's Russia than a state sponsor of terrorism. You've earned that distinction. Now, if you'll turn the children over, that goes away. But he denies really the fact that he's taken Ukrainian children away from their families to Russia. Well, he's lying. He's lying through his teeth. So that's coming. And there are $300 billion of frozen Russian assets overseas. And we have legislation here, Senator Kennedy and others, that would take that money for the benefit of Ukraine. All 3 of these pieces of legislation are ripe. They're ready to go. And after this last rebuff by Putin of President Trump, now's the time to act. There was supposed to be a meeting in Budapest between President Trump and President Putin. Well, that is off now because the goal was to have a ceasefire at the line of contact. Ukraine said yes immediately. Comes to find that Russia has not changed its position at all. So I don't think that meeting is going to occur, and that's a good thing. No more meeting Putin until he changes his behavior. I think now's the time to put pressure on Putin's war machine economically. Now's the time to make Ukraine more lethal when it comes to defending itself. The tomahawks. President Trump is right. It's a complicated weapons system. But I would like to see some Tomahawks transferred to Europe and start a training program so that Ukrainians one day would be able to utilize these weapons. Now, why do we want that weapon? It could go deep into Russia and knock out factories that make drones that come from Iran, and to destroy missile factories that are used to terrorize the Ukrainian people at night. I think we have a moment here to act decisively with our European partners. I appreciate what President Trump has done to try to solve this conflict through diplomacy. I appreciate what he's done to make Ukraine more lethal, providing more weapons by selling to Europe weapons to the benefit of Ukraine. I appreciate the sanctions that were imposed yesterday, and I think they're having a beneficial effect already. But I think we need to do more. So as President Trump engages President Xi, it is my hope that the Chinese will change their position about this war and work with President Trump to get Putin's attention to find a way to end the bloodbath honorably and justly. Now, why do I keep talking about China? There is no way Putin can prosecute this war if China decided to isolate Russia and stop buying their oil. And we would find ways to help China with their oil needs so they wouldn't be at a loss. If that happened, then this war would end pretty quickly. So to President Trump, good luck. I'm glad you're talking to China about a bunch of things, including trade. I'm sure you'll talk about the recent efforts of the Chinese Communist Party to go after Christians in an unprecedented way in China. The Christian church is under assault. We have a lot of differences with China. But if China wants to change its relationship with the United States, you have a chance in the next few days to do it in a positive way. And to China, if I and others believed that you used your influence with Putin to end this bloodbath in Ukraine, it would be the benefit of you over time. I would respond differently than I have in the past. I think Western Europe would respond differently than they have in the past. So this is an opportunity for China to do something good for the world. You have it in your power to get Putin's attention unlike anybody else on the planet. I would urge you to use that power to end the bloodbath. And if you choose to continue to buy cheap Russian oil to fuel Putin's war machine, to benefit your economy, then you should not be surprised that we push back hard. It's your choice. But I am speaking for most everybody in this body, where we believe the time has come for China, India, and Brazil to stop profiting off this war. The time has come to end this bloodbath. And to China, India, and Brazil, you have the power, if you would use it, to get Putin's attention like no one else on the planet. To India, you're definitely moving in the right direction. China made some announcements today about maybe reducing their purchases of Russian oil. All of this is good. And the reason I keep talking about this is I've concluded that unlike anybody else on the planet, China can, if they choose to, help us end this war better than anybody. So I'm appealing to President Xi to help President Trump end a war that should have been ended a long time ago. And I'm very concerned if this war continues, then the relationship between the United States and China is going to get worse, not better. And I seek it to be better. So, Madam President, you've been involved in everything I've just said. You've been one of the leading champions of protecting the Ukrainian children kidnapped by the Russians. You're one of the first people that sponsored the legislation. You've been to Ukraine numerous times. I know you have a personal relationship with Ukraine. It goes back to a long time ago when you were actually involved with Ukraine and Ukrainian families spending some time there. You have been a strong, consistent voice that Russia needs to stop. We need to end the war, not continue the war. And to my Senate colleagues, you've been asking me a long time, when are we going to move your bill? It's not my bill, it's our bill. The time has come. I'm hoping, and I believe the majority leader agrees, that the time has come. We'll wait to see what happens in China, but if nothing changes in China, then we need to have a week, I believe, of where this body focuses on applying pressure against Russia to end this conflict for the betterment of the world. With that, I yield.